I am a senior account executive at Reliance Insurance, and we are very pleased to present, along with the Manufacturing Safety Alliance of BC, this important information to help you with the reopening of your business or address the new challenges due to COVID-19. The safety of your employees, customers, vendors, and other visitors to your premises is important, and we want to help you achieve that. At Reliance, we realize that there is much more than insurance to keep a business healthy, which is why we provide protection beyond insurance. We offer seminars and other risk management solutions that help companies protect their culture, promote their brand, and ultimately increase their profits. Today's event is live and it's being recorded. We will share the recording with you and the resources at the end of the session. We will be muting everybody during the session, but once we finish our presentation, we will unmute you all and you will be able to ask questions in the chat box or by using the Zoom hands up feature. The MSABC are the Health and Safety Association for Manufacturers and Food Processors in British Columbia, providing resources and support and training to improve health and safety. I would like to introduce Lisa McGuire, the founder and CEO of Manufacturing Safety Alliance of BC. Lisa oversees all management, governance, and strategic direction. Thank you very much, Lisa, for being here, and I will now turn things over to you for your presentation.
Thank you, Carrie, for the introduction. Good morning.
You're welcome.
Today I'm going to be talking about what the new normal means and how to develop a COVID-19 safety plan to protect your workers. In joining me, I have our occupational hygienist, Jasmine, who will be joining us for questions at the end of the session. Hygienists maintain workplace health and safety by identifying, evaluating, and controlling exposures to various substances such as chemical, physical, ergonomic, and biological hazards. So please consider questions that you'll be able to help support, particularly around PPE, and I look forward to hearing from you at the end of the session. So to begin, I'm going to be talking about the various roles of stakeholders that they play during this pandemic, and then moving forward with how to develop a COVID-19 safety plan and what new normal means. And then I'm going to move into the essential role that leaders play, and then follow up with PPE and how to support and procure through the supply chain, and then close with contingency planning. So starting with the various stakeholders, we have the Provincial Health Office, WorkSafe BC, and health and safety associations, and we are one of 13 health and safety associations in British Columbia. So when we look at the Provincial Health Office at the very top, Dr. Bonnie Henry, and many of you or most of you will know who she is. She's the Chief Provincial Health Officer for BC and leads the overall direction for all of us during this pandemic. So under her leadership, several orders have been delivered that include the requirement to develop a COVID-19 safety plan. BC has seen success in flattening the curve with a declining number of COVID-19 positive cases, with BC having the lowest mortality of any jurisdiction in Canada, the US, and Western Europe, with more than 5 million people. So the Provincial Health Office provides overall direction in consultation with BC Centre for Disease Control for reopening that include requirements for the COVID-19 safety plan. They issue orders, inspections. They determine whether your facility opens or closes based on a COVID-19 positive test, and managing outbreaks. So when you look to the right, our BC's Restart Plan, we are in phase 2 with emerging on phase 3. June 1st is Monday of next week. WorkSafe BC develops industry sector requirements as outlined by the Public Health Office and resources for the COVID-19 safety plan in consultation with organizations such as health and safety associations. They also ensure compliance of the COVID-19 plans and health and safety requirements as part of their regular inspection activities. So note, your COVID-19 safety plan does not need to be submitted to WorkSafe BC before you open your business. As I mentioned, the Manufacturing Safety Alliance of BC is one of 13 health and safety associations in British Columbia. There's a number of different brands that I've put on this page that serve various sectors to help support you, not only for COVID-19, but any other health and safety challenge that you're facing. Health and safety associations help in a variety of ways. Our organization has developed a number of resources and training to help support companies in the manufacturing and food industry during this pandemic. We have several recorded webinars that we've hosted live over the past, several weeks, as well as a very detailed resource page in different segments that is available. And I have a link that is attached to this presentation for you to access. In addition, we've developed a number of tools as well as a COVID-19 checklist that, again, I have a link to that following several slides in this presentation. We also have a team of health and safety advisors to help businesses navigate through both COVID-19 and other health and safety risks that arise. Here's a picture of all of them. And again, access via phone. We have consultation sessions over the phone virtually that has been organized, as well as there's an opportunity to send in questions through our website. So what does adapting to the new normal mean, and how do we learn more about what COVID-19 is in terms of transmission? Well, starting with what the expectations for the COVID-19 safety plan, again, all operating businesses need to develop a written COVID-19 safety plan outlining how you're reducing the risk of exposure to COVID-19 and prepare to operate under these terms for 12 to 18 months as outlined in the Public Health Office order. Again, safe operation plans must be presented if requested by a WorkSafe BC or public health officer. You need to post these plans on your website if you have a website, and needs to be in a place that is visible to workers, to the public and contractors. So before we begin looking at how do we put a plan together, we really need to understand the risks associated with COVID-19 and transmission. So COVID-19 is a coronavirus. It's part of the coronaviruses, or a large family of viruses found mostly in animals. And in humans, they can cause different types of diseases, ranging from the common cold to more significant and severe diseases such as SARS and MERS. SARS in 2003 was an epidemic affecting 26 countries and resulted in more than 8,000 cases with 774 fatalities. MERS, or Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, was identified in 2012 and globally has had more than 2,400 cases, and over a third of those cases ended in fatalities. When you look at COVID-19, we're at a 5.6 million positive cases with 347,000 fatalities in our first wave. So preventing transmission is important to protect the health and safety for all of us. Recognizing that many of the characteristics of COVID-19 are still unknown, we are still learning about it, and you'll see these are the changes and adaptations that we've all heard about around us, and of course through Dr. Bonnie Henry, looking at how do we consider that when we shape our COVID-19 safety plan. So how is COVID-19 transmitted? To learn about this, we need to understand fluid, the primary form of transmission, which is fluid transmission, through larger liquid droplets when a person coughs or sneezes, or when they're talking in very close proximity to another individual. So these droplets, then the virus can enter through these droplets within the body of another individual when this individual breathes, or when these droplets land on a surface and then you touch that surface, and then of course touch your eyes and throat. So when we look at the conditions, it's much more likely, again, when you're in close proximity and in indoors versus outdoors. It's also, as I mentioned, transmitted when these contaminated droplets land on a surface. We touch that surface and then we touch our eyes and face without washing it, following proper hygienic processes. Talking about the incubation and transmission, the median incubation period, or time from infection to first appearance of symptoms, is what that is defined. And then the serial interval is the time between successive cases of COVID-19. So the serial interval of COVID-19 is approximately 5 to 6 days. This next slide is really important because it provides a guide of what we're trying to do. The risk of transmission really from social interactions in the workplace. There's two terms I'd like you to learn. The density, which is the number of people in your workplace at the same time, and then the contact density. So this is the type of contact, the proximity or the close distance between people at the workplace, and duration of the contact. So how long they're together. So with that, what we're trying to do is you look at the high boxes, orange boxes in that graph, move it from an area that perhaps is at a high risk to a lower risk. And with that, we look at the number of people and how frequently and how they're interacting in the workplace. So with that, we look at physical distancing measures. How do we reduce the density of people in your workplace, considering the intensity and number of contacts? By applying various controls. And I'm going to be working through the hierarchy of controls to help you understand how do we do that? How do we do that applies to our unique business setting? So as I mentioned, the COVID-19 safety plan is written. It identifies and is customized specific to your organization that you need to prepare for utilizing over the next 12 to 18 months or until a public health office lifts the public emergency requirement. So here's a graphic that really provides a high-level planning, development of the plan, communicating, most importantly, and following the processes within that so that you can begin to operate under these new normal guidelines. I now, after we've learned about what is a risk and how do we consider applying processes to reduce transmission, we will now work through the guidelines to develop your COVID-19 safety plan. So starting with, there are 6 steps. So within the 6 steps, we need to begin by assessing the risk at your workplace of where transmission could occur. And then proceed with implementing measures to reduce the risk, considering hygiene and sanitation, as we've talked about. Proper hygiene, if the virus exists, will kill it and won't allow that virus to get to the place where it could enter your body. Maintaining physical distance. Again, as I talked about, fluid transmission is a primary form of transmission. So when you're beyond that, the 2 meter or 6 feet distance, you are at a position where it's unlikely for this virus to come into your body. And then applying where distancing measures cannot be maintained. How do you control? How do you address those circumstances? Developing policies, and then most importantly, developing communication plans and training, and monitoring your workplace to ensure that they are effective. Updating your plans as new information becomes available, or what you've put in place is not effective. These are the processes and steps you need to consider in working through and shaping your plan. And then last but not least, assessing new risks that potentially could arise when you have been not been operating over the past few months. I have attached a link to the bottom if you wanted to access this particular step guideline page, and it's on the WorkSafe BC website. So let's start with the first step, assessing the risk at the workplace. We start by looking at your workplace demographic of the people, the number of people, and the composition of who they are. You need to consider, do all workers need to return, or can some work from home effectively? You need to consider in your workplace demographic, are there higher risk categories, those that are over 60 or immunocompromised? Consider the transportation. Are they commuting to work via a group transport or through the BC Transit, for example? How are they? Because all those introduce different types of risks. And then considering community living, some workplaces have immigrants that are supporting their business. So do they live together in a dormitory, or are they in separate apartments? Again, all part of the risk assessment. You need to consider and move forward a site inspection. So for those that need to be on site, you need to do a walkthrough for the on-site workers. Where and how do people interact? Both the type, so how close are they within that interaction, and how frequently, what is the duration for tasks or conditions? And obtain feedback, because sometimes you don't know all of what happens within the interaction. So getting feedback from workers on ways that we could perhaps reduce exposure is part of the process that you need to consider in assessing the risk at the workplace. And then the third C is identify where risk of transmission, where does that happen? And how can we minimize from exposure due to fluid transmission, the coughing and sneezing, or touching contaminated surfaces? So as you walk through in shaping your risk assessment, consider asking these questions. Where do people come together? What spaces are shared? For example, the kitchen or the boardroom, or areas where people come together within your workplace. What job tasks or processes require workers to come into close contact with one another or with members of the public? Is materials exchange, such as credit cards or money or paper? What tools, machinery, or equipment do people come into contact with? And then, of course, what shared surfaces that we don't normally think of are touched often, like doorknobs, light switches, elevator buttons. All this needs to be considered, because as we know, these droplets could again be transferred and remain on surfaces for a period of time, that when someone else touches those surfaces and perhaps touches the face is where entry could happen. The second step then really looks at identifying and implementing measures to control or reduce the risk. So let's talk about the foundational measures to reduce transmission. First and foremost, having good programs to ensure sick people don't come to work, because that's where entry could happen. Stay home if you're sick. It is a really important program to ensure that this is happening within your workplace. And then applying and retaining social distancing protocols where possible. Again, minimizing the opportunity if somebody is sick for you having to transfer that to another individual. And then, of course, the opportunity to ensure good hygiene and sanitation processes, because that kills the virus before it has the opportunity, if it's present, to enter the body. Those three parameters are what you're considering as you're putting your program and process together. And in doing so, applying the hierarchy of controls to reduce transmission. We've heard probably a lot about this, the hierarchy of controls, and the importance of considering always to start at the top when selecting your safeguards, and only choosing a less effective safeguard when it's impractical to do so. For the purpose of this session, I'm going to be focusing on engineering, administrative, and PPE, because elimination is utilized in situations where in the workplace, if those individuals are higher risk, for example, people are traveling or coming in from other countries, it is required that you mandatorily socially isolate. You need to be at home for 14 days. So looking at the workplace application, you're really then looking at ways to prevent transmission as we're applying it from a workplace parameter. So engineering controls really speak to the interventions that are physical. So these are hard to move barriers or tools or something that is set in place, physical changes to the workplace that prevents an isolation really between the workers and the hazard. So I'll give you some examples that are fairly common in the workplace. This is a food processing environment, but the picture to your left is in a locker room. So there is a plexiglass or plastic barrier that has been installed that individuals utilize and are protected from, being close to one another when they're perhaps taking off their boots or changing into their workplace versus home clothes. So looking at the right picture is a lunchroom setting. So it is in a food processing where individuals are eating their lunch within a plexiglass framework. So that remains stationed within the room, and individuals come in for their lunch, and that is where they reside for the period of time. Other examples, this is again a food processing environment where plastic sheeting has been suspended from the ceiling, so individuals work next to each other, but there is a barrier in between them. Other important parameters for engineering controls are to ensure that there's adequate cleaning and hand washing stations. So the picture to your left is plumbed into a building versus the station in the middle, which really speaks to a portable unit. So businesses that wouldn't have a drain perhaps could use and access this technology for their business. The right station speaks to or shows a sanitizer that is hardwired into a position so that workers or individuals can spray the doorknob as they enter into the next room. Other barriers that are included within examples here is a plexiglass in between workers. They're certainly at quite a distance apart from one another, but again, an opportunity to include these controls. I want to speak briefly of ventilation because it's an important consideration in lowering the risk of COVID-19 transmission. Outside, as we mentioned, has always a better option than inside a building. So opening your windows where possible to increase airflow and ventilate effectively. So we do have a checklist available if you'd like to include that within your safe operation plan. And there is, in addition, technology available to kill pathogens on surfaces. If again, you're interested in this type of technology, we can forward contacts to you. Administrative control. So this is changing the way people work to mitigate risk. It may include training and education, policy changes, safe work procedures, and practicing good hygiene. So with that, having the station is important. It's engineered into your work environment, but the assurance that they're utilized is an administrative control. So policy and protocols on training and monitoring for washing stations and the equipment, including the common areas, are important to include within developing your COVID-19 safety plan. Other policies and procedures, so ensuring, again, these are examples. In some cases, we've had one-way flow, clocking in and clocking out. There's a segregation so that you can ensure the distancing as your team or workers go in and out of the workplace. And then the picture to your right is in lunchrooms. So with that, you have the individual tables that are separated, but really the control is ensuring people go to the lunchroom and not move the tables closer to one another because they aren't stationed within the floor. And then we move to personal protective equipment. So it is considered the last line of defense, placing a barrier between the person and the hazard. So in the context of COVID-19, based on the site-specific risk assessment, PPE should be used where social distancing cannot be achieved. Or for example, hygiene stations and practical when we're considering gloves. But really you need to consider based on your risk assessment. So there's a number of different types of PPE. Here's an example where we have a face shield, and with that we have goggles. So again, it's a barrier that is put in front of the individual. So these particular areas are entry points for the potential virus to gain access. Gloves, again, sometimes used when perhaps access to sanitation is not possible. So with that, there is procedures and training required to ensure that you're taking the glove on or putting the glove on and off. because the theory is that your hand is clean underneath those gloves. So there is a process involved in doing that effectively. I'll be talking more about PPE towards the end of the presentation, but again, this is one of the potential considerations in your program. And then, of course, respirators. There's been a lot of discussion on respirators, what type of respirators to use and in what settings. And there is a number of, again, options. So with that, if you do have questions, as I mentioned, we have Jasmine here, really directed at her expertise in this area, because there is a plethora of types out in the market. The next step then is really looking at developing policies. And with that, looking at the processes around your visitors or authorization of workplace access. So really important components to include in your overall COVID-19 safety plan, in addition to your pre-screening of workers and monitoring to ensure that they are healthy when they come to work and they're not sick. So having processes around that important that include a process around illnesses arising at the workplace and notification processes incorporated within your policy, safety procedures for workers that aren't on site, but they're working off-site or alone. Self-isolation processes within the workplace policy. Anybody with COVID-19 symptoms and knowing what they are, so fever, chills, cough, sore throat, shortness of breath, painful swallowing, must self-isolate for 10 days. Or if a public health officer directs one of your workers to self-isolate, they need to be able to do so. Or if you're arriving from outside of Canada, as I mentioned, currently right now, everybody must self-isolate for 14 days if you reside within Canada. Step 4 is communication plans and training, which are essential ingredients to ensure success. Your COVID-19 safety plan will not be effective without training people on the parameters and effectively communicating and monitoring its success. Everybody entering the workplace must be trained on the policy processes within the Safe Operation Plan. You need to post signage where practical and appropriate, including things like occupational limits, how to wash your hands properly, if you're sick, what to do to ensure that you don't enter the workplace when you're sick. Adequate oversight, again, to ensure compliance. It is essential that individuals are overseeing to ensure that the processes that are in place are followed and followed consistently. So step 5 talks all about monitoring and updating the plan as required. So we know that COVID-19 is an evolving virus. As we learn more about it, so do the measures and protocols may need to change as a result. So ensuring that you have a process to review your plan. Controls that are identified may not work as you thought that they might. So you need to include a strategy to review your plan. My suggestion is to include a review of your plan regularly at the Joint Health and Safety Committee and be a standing agenda item. Consult your Joint Health and Safety Committee or representative based on the size of your organization in the processes and mechanisms to address any concerns that arise. It's a really important part of ensuring that your plan will be effectively adopted and supported within your workplace. And last but not least, step 6 is assessing and addressing risks for returning operations. So if you haven't been operating over the past few months, you need to consider, are there any risks that would have been introduced as a result of your workplace not running? Do you have new workers on your team that need to be oriented or trained? Do you have new product lines or new tools that have been introduced? Again, considering the risks that that are considered within bringing them into your operations. New risks from starting up. Workers have been away for a period of time and then need to come to tasks that perhaps are difficult or require labor. You need to consider the ergonomic component and other hazards that may be introduced. These are all of the steps required to be considered as you put together your COVID-19 safety plan. I've moved through this material quite quickly, but there are resources to help support you further. We have a COVID-19 safety assessment, and I would invite you to walk through to see if that would support you in putting your plan together. In addition, as I mentioned, we have a team of health and safety experts to be able to support and answer your questions, or you can consider securing a consultation over the internet virtually to be able to answer specific unique adaptations that will certainly help support your next steps. In addition, I have WorkSafe BC's sector-specific resources included on this page that were released just recently, and they define industry-specific components, and I've listed all of the sectors on the screen that also include a COVID-19 safety plan template. So lots of resources to help support your next steps as you put together your plan. So now I'm going to move into the next segment, which really speaks to the essential roles that leaders play within the scope of moving forward and adopting your your COVID-19 safety plan. Leaders play a critical role to ensure the safety plans developed is adopted and implemented. As leaders, it is important to begin by reflecting on where we are as an organization in effectively managing health and safety risk. Have you had injuries? How have you worked through and developed solutions to ensure that they didn't happen? Organizations with a health and safety management system perhaps are further ahead. We have companies that are OC certified or CORE certified, so they have a mechanism for identifying risk within their organization and processes that follow. So perhaps have better strategies already in place compared to those that don't. But all of us can help support those next steps effectively. Reflecting where you are will help you move forward collectively with your workforce in adopting new ways of operating successfully through this pandemic. Stay informed. It's important that you have the knowledge or know where to access accurate information. There will be lots of questions. Finding ways to adopt solutions as quickly as possible are a really important part of your strategy. Demonstrating commitment through your actions and decisions is important in the business. Your actions and decisions influence what is important, which in turn impacts the choices made on the shop floor and communicate to everybody what is valued most. That reinforces what is important to the people in the organization. And this starts with you at the very top. Administrative controls will not be effective without it. Administrative controls is a collective behaviors. Your role in communication and involvement with the Joint Health and Safety Committee, very important. Ensuring effective communication, really important. Regular, clear communication channels at all employee levels to address concerns that arise. Again, an important component to help answer and address challenges that come up on a regular basis that will help support your success in defining solutions. The role of the Joint Health and Safety Committee, again, an important way for workers and employers to work together to identify and find solutions to workplace health and safety issues. This assists in building a collaborative environment, a collaborative plan that is adopted by everybody. They also are advocates in the workplace to strengthen good behaviors, to ensure things like reminding each other to wash our hands when sometimes that we forget. All of these things are really important inclusion parameters that we need to incorporate within our process. And then, of course, including mental health support strategies. There's uncertainty and impact of change for all of us, creating anxiety, which is mentally challenging. So ensuring that we have strategies to assist in alleviating anxieties and concerns at the very first opportunity, important. Addressing answers to questions that arise is an important way that we can help reduce and manage stress and anxiety at the first opportunity. I've included a number of links here for you to consider, including within your program. We have a psychological first aid service. It's a free virtual counseling, provincial registered psychologist service. So please, you can access it through this link, as well as several other links for you to consider including. I'm now going to move forward with talking about the supply chain, personal protective equipment, and beyond, a little bit more information in this area. So first of all, once it's defined that indeed PPE is part of your risk management program, it's identified as an important control, you need to consider the type you're going to use and potential substitutes of equal or greater effectiveness. It's important to consider this so that in the event you're not able to obtain the specific type of PPE that you have selected as being a critical portion of your plan, that you have alternatives and they've already been considered as you work through the process. PPE must include fit testing where relevant, maintenance, cleaning, and replacement. Again, training is the first step. Ensuring that people are following and applying those processes is critical. If a mask is not worn properly, it's ineffective. And we've all seen cases of where masks are not covering the mouth and nose. If you do not apply effective processes for applying and utilizing, they're not effective within your program. So it is a really important portion to ensure that all these parameters are included and managed within your health and safety program and your COVID-19 safety plan. And then you need to consider the supply chain. Where are you going to order to access this equipment? What quantities will you need? And do you have enough time, lead time, to ensure that if there is a back order, you can continue to operate under your PPE expectations within your plan? So all of these are important considerations in putting your plan together. We have a number of resources on our website and recorded webinars that includes things like how do you properly don and doff a respirator, how do you properly select equipment, tools and resources and products. So please, I invite you to access our link. If you're considering ordering supplies and you're challenged with where to begin, I know that the BC Food and Beverage has an order line opportunity for the agriculture and food processing industry, in addition with a couple of other links for you to consider. If you have any specific questions on PPE, again, I have Jasmine here to invite answers to help support your success. I now want to move forward with talking about contingency planning. So in an address last week by Dr. Bonnie Henry, this was a post, we've never had a pandemic in recorded history that has not had a second wave, so certainly considering how to prepare for one is important for all of us. Coronaviruses is an RNA virus which are prone to mutations and changes, and based on other historic pandemics such as SARS in 2002, H2N2 in 1957, as well as H1N1 in 2009, and of course, the deadly 1918 influenza pandemic that had 3 separate waves. So here in BC, the Provincial Health Officer, Dr. Bonnie Henry, has motioned that British Columbians should prepare that this could be the case with COVID-19, a respiratory-based virus that currently has no vaccine or cure. So how do we do that? Well, you need to prepare your businesses for operating or getting good at operating under your COVID-19 safety plan. Review your plan and consider, are there any gaps in strengthening controls before the flu season hits? We know that coronaviruses thrive in cooler temperatures. and lower humidity conditions, which is our fall and winter. So ensure that you have processes in place to review your plan, as I suggested, perhaps at the Joint Health and Safety Committee meeting, identify gaps and strengthen to the best of your ability. And then, of course, I would suggest developing processes for managing a facility COVID-19 outbreak. Prepare yourself for these steps and how would this apply to my business, and how can I put that plan together in the event it does happen. I invite you to review the webinar that we hosted with Dr. Michael Schwant, who is a Vancouver Coastal Health Medical Health Officer. Again, a lot of good information to help support you in putting your plan together. It's accessible and available on this link, and certainly freely available to everybody that wants to access this information. So I want to conclude with this final slide, opportunity to thank you all for participating. You know, we are in this together, requiring all of us working together to achieve success, to protect ourselves, our workers, our families, and community while maintaining and growing our economy. Please, we're here to help, so do not hesitate to contact us. I've listed our support line and our website one more time. So again, thank you for listening and being part of this webinar.
Thank you very much, Lisa. I can't imagine that there's more information that you could put together in that webinar. That was really, really great and organized, and I like the lists and the step-by-step instructions too. That's going to be very helpful. So we would like to open up for anybody they would like to ask a question to Lisa, or also to Jasmine about some specifics on the safety equipment. Please raise your hand in the hands up, or you may type a message in the chat and we will ask the question for you. In the meantime, I thought I would just mention something I saw really interesting there, was that portable cleaning equipment. I'm not sure if that's something new because of COVID-19, or is it just something that was used in another application and now it's decided that that would also be effective to provide instant cleaning facilities? And
yeah, I think it's just, you know, having the opportunity to have access to a proper sanitation, you know, support or a technology is important, because we know that the importance of practicing good hygiene in as one of the essential controls. So certainly companies have adapted and adopted ways to be able to support access to businesses. So if you need more information on that, I have an individual who certainly has forwarded information to me on this type of technology that I'd be happy to share and perhaps include in your links out to the community or the participants.
Just looking to see if we have any other questions here. And if not, I have another question.
Sure.
So my question is, are you finding from your members and people in your community that they are being able to access and purchase and stock themselves with the various cleaning equipment and the PPE equipment and sanitizer and wipes and all of that kind of thing that they want to have in there?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, I'll invite Jasmine. I know she is certainly working with the various companies that we support. What are you finding, Jasmine, in just, is there challenges with being able to put in appropriate sanitation equipment and or any other challenges with PPE?
Thanks, Lisa. So in regards to PPE, we are seeing members are having some trouble acquiring them, especially respirators. Right now, there's a narrow focus on the N95s, But right now what it is they're being allocated for the healthcare sector. So this is requiring manufacturers to look into other options, and whether this be cloth masks or other types of respiratory protection, which may provide more protection than the typical N95, the disposable. So there is, I know like some of my clients that have orders that they say it will come in September. So there is a little bit of backlog in terms of that. Face shields, however, there are a lot of local manufacturers that are stepping up, and they have converted to making face shields. As Lisa mentioned, in terms of, there's a link on our website that you can access, and you can see who are the manufacturers who can give you this type of equipment. They're local, and you could probably acquire them much more at a faster rate. In terms of cleaning supplies, from my members, I feel like they're able to acquire them a bit faster than it was at the start of the pandemic. But it's PPE that's a little bit on backlog right now.
Okay, well, I guess hopefully if there is eventually the catch up, and then if we are dealing with this again in a few months' time, then we'll be a little bit more prepared at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Jasmine, can you talk a little bit about the substitutes? I know like K95, N95, there's been a lot of questions on that, just in case it becomes a consideration as a PPE. Maybe just share that with the participants?
Sure. For alternatives to like the N95, you may have heard about the KN95. The KN95 is it's a standard that is recognized by China, it's theirs, whereas the N95 is an American standard. And that's certified by a organization. They work under the CDC in the States, and they're called NIOSH. So the KN95, there is a list on the CDC's website, and it is now under Health Canada, do reference it, that you should only buy the KN95s from reputed sellers. So there are a lot of fakes on the market as well. So just be wary of what you're buying. If the price is too good to be true, just double check who the manufacturers are. It was a long list initially at the start of this pandemic, but they are testing this mask and saying, okay, they're not up to the standard that they're being advertised on, even through these like authorized sellers. So I know recently, in like the last week or two, they have updated that list to include the authorized sellers again. So just ensure the KN95 are from those specific manufacturers if you are implementing those at your workplace. In terms of equivalence, the KN95, if it is manufactured to the same standard to the standard that China has, then they are the equivalent to the N95. There are other respirators as well that are certified from Europe. Those are called the FFP2s and FFP1s. There is a list of different equivalents if you guys want to reach out to me, or also there is a webinar on our website for respiratory protection basics that goes into much more detail in terms of the equivalents and what you should be considering. But there are other equivalents on the market from other countries.
Thank you. So we have a question from Mark. Mark has asked if we could ask on his behalf, what can an employee do if they don't feel safe coming to their workplace?
So Jasmine, what would be your response?
Well, in terms of that, again, ultimately it falls under the employer to provide a safe work environment, right? So if some employee has a concern like this, I would first of all address that situation with the employee and see what aspects of it do they feel is unsafe. Because I feel like with COVID-19, there's a lot of rumors. There's not enough knowledge around it as well. So to address and just walk through the steps of what is being done and to give the reasoning why we are putting these controls in place, that might help deflate the situation. But I definitely want to say just first, try to create awareness on that, because there's a lot of misinformation out there, and just to see, okay, what is causing this concern, and seeing, because most likely the controls you are putting in place, whether it be engineering, admin, or PPE, those should be good enough to protect against COVID.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's communication, It's building those relationships again that I talked about so that we really get to learn about what is causing the fear and how can we help eliminate it if possible. And that's really, I think, the foundation on it. It's really integral within your COVID-19 plan. You need to have these strategies in place because there will be questions and concerns that are very personal and cause anxiety that need to be addressed with solutions.
Definitely. And another question from Chris. Chris is asking, what are the top 1 or 2 most common mistakes that companies are making?
Jasmine, do you have any insight being on the front lines with working with our employers?
Yeah. One of the mistakes that we are either seeing with our clients is, okay, first of all, the lack of communication. Again, this relates to the previous question that we answered. Why are you putting in controls without either you're not training your workers? So again, the lack of training and lack of awareness is one of the key issues we're seeing in terms of like the problems arising. And also the PPE. So right now, PPE is being considered as the first and only option when considering controls. So employers it's the easiest, right? It's the cheapest as well. But there are other options, like look into the hierarchy, consider engineering administrative controls. For PPE being issued, just ensure, like when you give a piece of equipment to a worker, you can't assume that they know how to use it, how to maintain it, store it. So the lack of training would be another mistake our clients or our members we have encountered. So we do advise, okay, carry out the training, ensure they know how to use, maintain, store their PPE.
It's very helpful. Kane has a 2-part question. And it reads as follows. There are a few myths regarding workplace and COVID-19. One being the immune system is generally weaker since everyone didn't have the outside exposure. Is there truth to that? And is there any preventative measures employees can take before stepping into the workplace?
So it certainly falls into a medical type question. I don't know, Jasmine, do you have any insight?
In terms of, yeah, that would be a medical question.
It'd be a medical question,
yeah.
And certainly that's not our expertise, but what about the second?
Fair enough.
Can you please repeat the second question?
I sure can. Is there any preventative measures that employees can take before they are stepping into the workplace?
Preventative measures would be just be aware of what you're feeling, how you're feeling. If you feel like you're having any symptoms that are advertised for COVID-19, just know that, okay, maybe you shouldn't step into work. Maybe you notify your manager or supervisor first. In terms of how you would have like a healthy diet and stuff, that would be more for the medical side in terms of what you should be doing. But just be self-aware of your symptoms. Don't just be like, oh, I'll go through the workday, I'll be fine. Just be more cautious and consider everybody you're working with as well.
I think that's a great point, that you step into work remembering that you need to be considerate of everyone around you.
In terms of the first question, if you'd like to forward it to us, we have a relationship with a medical doctor that is supporting our organization for all medical related questions. So we'd certainly be happy to get a response to you after we close the show today. He's been very receptive to answering a number of medical related questions because, you know, it is a virus. So please, I invite you to forward that to me at the end of this webinar session.
Thank you, Lisa. So do we see any other questions? I'm looking, just speaking to the hosts and, okay. Well, I would just like to thank everyone for asking the questions, and I hope that the seminar was helpful. There was some excellent information outlining the various roles, talking about PPE equipment, and giving us some insight on planning for the hopefully not to happen second wave. I liked how everything was just lined out in step by step and very organized. And when we are sharing the slides with our viewers, I feel that they're going to find that very helpful. So thank you for having such a organized presentation.
Carrie,
in closing, yes, sorry.
I just, Shannon Starr has a question. Shannon, do you want to type or we can unmute you?
Hi, Shannon, sorry.
The question is, do you know of what liabilities employers have?
Sorry, what was the question? I couldn't hear.
She asked, do you know of what liability employers have?
Jasmine, do you want to answer that one, or?
In terms of health and safety, again, it falls under the employer to provide a safe and healthy work environment for all their employees. So in terms of liability, I don't know if it's more of a liability. Again, it's the responsibility of the employer. I don't know, Lisa, do you have something to add to that?
Yeah, so absolutely. I mean, we all have responsibilities as employers under the regulations. So with that, we have an expectation to fulfill certain duties and roles. And with that is to comply. So as it relates to COVID-19, we were required, all of us who are operating businesses, to ensure that we have a COVID-19 safety plan. And that's at the very highest level of authority, requiring that of us. So with that, and it also includes health and safety regulations. So we have a duty and obligation to protect workers that work with us. So that is really an expectation that all of us need to meet as employers within British Columbia.
Shannon, I think I'm going to unmute you if you want to ask the last two parts of your question. That might be a bit clearer for everybody. So I'm just going to take a second here to unmute you. Well, for some reason, I can't. Maybe you can unmute yourself. It's not allowing me to do that. I'm not sure if she's, oh, her microphone's not set up. So her extra questions were regarding the liability, what as in being sued if something happens. So if we're complying to everything, then what covers us?
So in turn, when you say what covers us, I mean, under the Act, again, employees have given up the right to sue because we have the whole WorkSafe BC Compensation Act that protects that process. So, which is different in other countries. For example, in the UK, they do have the opportunity employees to sue, but in BC, that it's not possible. I don't know, Jasmine, do you have anything further to add with that?
Yeah, I agree. If anything, again, if you're not being compliant with the regulation, what WorkSafe is requiring from you, you can get fined. You can have citations, orders issued to you from WorkSafe BC. And then there are various penalties related, again, if, again, no other action is being taken.
Right.
I hope that answers your question, Shannon.
Yes, and if it hasn't, email us and we'll get a full response within the scope of additional maybe sub-questions that you have on that.
We do actually have another question from Barry Baker. Can clients sue an employer if they catch COVID-19 from the establishment?
I don't know, Jasmine, if you want to elaborate?
No, they cannot sue. As per my knowledge, no. Again, it could be going through like WorkSafe BC. If they, again, yeah, you won't be able to sue in that case.
No, and that is a whole Workers' Compensation Act. You know, it's an insurance. So with the establishment of that process, it prevents employees from suing their employer. That's how the establishment of the entire system was established, to prevent that. But
I think the question related to clients. So clients, customers coming on to someone's work site.
So customers, again, I would have to, I mean, that would be a legal question. I'd have to, right, again, that wouldn't be under the Workers' Compensation Act. I would have to get back to you specifically because that would be a legal related question unless, I don't, Jasmine, you don't have anything further to add on that?
No, I wouldn't know the answer to that question.
I'd have to ask that. I mean, certainly, I think we're all in a situation where we have to exist with this unknown virus. I think it would be very difficult from my perspective to be able to really align where that would happen. But I would have to get, legal counsel to support an answer specifically on that request.
Good morning. It's Chris Ball. I just wanted to jump in on that, on Barry's question, and say that nothing prevents anyone from trying to sue an establishment providing a good or service from anything. People can always lawyer up and seek to do these things. I think that, my suspicion is, and I'm not a lawyer, but my suspicion is that based on what we've typically seen in past case history in insurance is that if there is an ongoing common exposure to the public and people began suing over it. So, if you could sue the government over weather events, if you could sue, each other over a number of things that are just everyday occurrences, you can't sue for catching the common cold from an establishment. Yeah. And if a judge were to rule in favor of a claimant in this case, I think it would set a precedent by which we'd all be suing each other for any number of things. I think it's highly unlikely, Barry. I mean, not impossible, because lawyers can get quite creative in terms of how they want to interpret the law and apply the law or seek to have it applied. That being said, there could be negligence on an establishment's behalf if they haven't taken the proper protocols to protect people from the actual risk. So assuming you're in compliance with WorkSafe BC and employment standards, and assuming you're in compliance with whatever regulations the governments have handed down in terms of how you need to operate as a business, for example, number of people in your establishment, maintaining social distancing between various areas customers can be, then I think it would be really, really, really hard to prove negligence in that situation, and it would make the chances of success of a claim even proceeding highly unlikely.
Thank you, Chris. So, Andrea, are you seeing any other questions?
I am not seeing any other questions or hands up. I'm just going to scroll through quickly.
10:33.
Yeah, I think we're probably good. So if you want to just wrap up, we're good to go.
Okay. So again, thank you both very much, Lisa and Jasmine. And I just wanted to close with a couple of statements. And the first one is that we here are insurance brokers, and we would like to remind everybody that there is a significant increase in cyber hacking and cyber crimes against businesses, and companies are very vulnerable right now. People are distracted by the issues of the pandemic, and the criminals are taking advantage of that. We have many resources of cyber insurance and information about cyber risk. So please, if you are considering any of that detail, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. And in closing, obviously, again, thank you very much, Lisa and Jasmine. Thank you so much to our audience. We really appreciate that. You took the time today to attend our webinar. And finally, we will be sending resources with the follow-up email, including the links to the webinar with the slides and also with some cyber insurance information. And last but not least, before we close, I would like to suggest that everybody visit the MSABC website and read Lisa's message. It is a very personal and inspiring, and it really brings a lot of perspective on how we are so fortunate to be here where we are, I would say, in Canada, dealing with this pandemic. And it'll really just sort of bring another, I say, perspective to the situation that we are all in at the same time here together. So again, thank you so much, everybody, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Lisa and Carrie.
Thank you. Thank you all.
All right,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Okay, bye-bye.